What's up, guys? Welcome to a fanfic reading today, and today we have a one with Sonata Dusk and Sunset Shimmer. It's called Not So Sweet. Sonata, and this is the description. Sonata, out of all the Siren sisters, has always been known as the nicest, the friendliest, to the point of being regarded as the least evil, but when she discovers that this is how people view her, she decides to show her fellow equestrian, Sunset, just how wrong they truly were. The chapter tells us called Not So Sweet, and just only one chapter as always. So without further ado, guys, let's get into it. Like I said, go check out the writers of this thing, just type it in and you should easily see it. They never have the same type of title name anyway. Anyway, here we go. Things were, for the most part, peaceful in the cafe this afternoon. Most of the usual crowds had come and gone, and now there were only about a handful of customers still here, with most just nursing a few small cups of tea. The one notable exception to this was sitting in a corner booth beside the largest window. Sonata, sitting opposite Sunset, was currently down in a very large milkshake. Was currently down on a very large milkshake, slurping it so loudly that, frankly, it was about the only notable sound in the cafe right now. Sunset, for her part, seemed both embarrassed and impressed by this display, and kept her eyes on her former foe until, finally, she'd finished, letting out a sigh of contentment over her drink. Ah. Now that's the stuff. Giggling slightly, Sunset took a sip of her own drink, a simple soda, before replying, "So, how are things over at Sugar Cube Corner?" Sonata's smile widened. "Oh, they've been going great. Miss Cake has this new line out, and everybody's just loving it." Sunset nodded. "Glad to hear it. So..." She sipped again. "Anything special planned for when you get back home?" Sonata nodded back. "Yep, Ari rented this old movie she heard about, a big fantasy thing, evil wizard, that kind of stuff." Leaning back into her side of the booth, Sunset considered that. You girls like that?" Sonata grinned again. "Sure, it's always fun seeing bad guys in movies. I mean..." She cocked an eyebrow. "We were bad guys, remember?" A chuckle escaped the former unicorn after hearing that. "Yeah, I know the feeling." For a time, neither girl said anything, but as Sonata continued to slurp down her drink, Sunset appeared deep in thought over something, ultimately just speaking her mind on the matter. "Although, I usually don't consider you to have ever been as bad as the others." Looking up from her drink, Sonata seemed confused, prompting Sunset to continue. "I mean, Adagio was all manipulative, and Aria could definitely be aggressive, but you just never struck me as a full-on bad guy, or rather, bad girl." Hearing that, Sonata frowned slightly. I kinda was, Sunset." Sunset nodded. "Oh, I know you went along with the same evil plan, and yeah, you did ask to have your way with my boyfriend once, but you know, you just always seemed, well, the least bad." Putting down her drink, Sonata let out an indient sounding huff. "I'll have you know, I did some pretty nasty stuff back in the day. Sure, Dagi and Ari could probably get called more obvious in their bad guyness, or whatever it's called." Sonata rolled her eyes at that, but said nothing as Sonata continued. "But I did bad stuff too. Seeing her speak that way, with such certainty in her voice, Sonata's earlier sentiment began to slowly fade from her expression. Instead, she looked to the youngest side with clear interest and curiosity. Instead, she looked to the youngest sign with clear interest and curiosity. What? What kind of stuff? Then, in a move eerily smiled to Adagio, Sonata started to develop into a knowing smirk, offering her hand to Sunset. Do you have that magic necklace of yours? Naturally, Sunset was somewhat taken aback by Sonata's words, and at first, she didn't quite understand what was being asked of her. But Sonata continued to reach her open hand across the table. Realization dawned for the ex-unicorn. Sighing, she leaned over to the side of a chair, reaching down to a school bag and starting to rummage around inside of it. It wasn't long before she pulled out the necklace in question, taking a moment to properly strap it around her neck. With that done, she once more looked to Sonata, reaching out her own hand, and before actually going ahead with it, speaking one final utterance. Alright then, let's see. She held Sonata's hand, and immediately her eyes began to glow bright white, just as they had done before whenever she used this power. A flood of images and memories began to pour in her mind, with some she recognized, while others were completely foreign to her. However, there came a time with one image in particular began to make itself known more promptly than the rest, and with the blink of an eye, that was the scenario she now found herself in. It was as if she was there, looking. It was as if she was looking through another's eyes. Sonata's to be more exact, and the place she now stood was far from pleasant. A stormy night, with rain, wind, and lightning aplenty. It seemed as though she was standing on the rocky edge of a sea or ocean of some sort, with the waves crashing hard against them. There they are, sisters. Sunset recognized the voice, and sure enough, as her eyes turned, she looked upon the clear image of Adagio, with Arya standing just beside her. From the looks of things, this was far back in the past, centuries most likely, given their current outfits, for both Adagio and Arya were only wearing the short dress that was common at this time, with but single shoulder straps to them both, and with the only distinction between them being the colour, with Arya's green and Adagio's purple, though she couldn't see. Sunset guessed that Sonata was dressed the same way, too. Adagio, for her part, was smirking, pointing out to the nearby sea. Right there. Again, Sonata's eyes turned, and it was here that Sunset saw that Adagio was referring to. A ship out there in the murkiness of the constant rain. The general design of it appeared to be consistent with pictures Sunset had seen in history books about vessels of this era, complete with large white sails. From the look of it, it was having a hard time keeping on track, and was threatened by every single wave that came its way. Before long, however, Sonata looked back to her elder sister. I believe it is your turn, Sonata," Adagio remarked. Through her eyes, Sunset saw Sonata nod her head, before turning back towards the ship and taking a single step forward. Briefly, all that could be heard was the sound of thunder, rain, and waves, but eventually another sound began to be mixed in with all of that, and one that Sunset recognized. It was a chanting of the silence, but from Sonata only. Her voice was soothing, enchanting, enticing, and it carried itself across the air as though the sounds of the storm were no deterrent against it whatsoever. Sunset watched, enraptured by what was happening. As soon the faraway ship began to turn, heading for the massive rocky outcropping the sign stood on. "That's it. A little closer," the voice of Arya spoke, and it did indeed. The ship drew nearer and nearer, captivated by Sonata's beautiful song. As if to emphasize her lure, Sonata's arm reached out and she used her index finger to further entice whoever might have seen her to come closer. Eventually, the inevitable happened and the ship hit the rocks. Wood creaked and splintered, creating holes too large to be ignored, and at the end of it all, the whole thing was stuck there. Was stuck there. Given how much things were obscured to Sunset because of the storm and the wind, it was hard for her to tell whether anybody had been hurt or killed in that crash. However, given how wrecked the ship itself looked by now, it was hard to imagine anyone walking away from it unscathed. Whatever the case, Sonata's song and the storm had conspired to bring the ship down, and with that task complete, the youngest siren looked back to Adagio, who smiled proudly. "Good work, Nada." Sunset could see Sonata's hands clasped together in front of her in a clear display of joy over her sister's remark, and speaking of whom, Adagio herself now turned her attention back to the ship. "Now then, let's see what treasures they had in there." More might have been shown, but instead the images began to blur and fade, and Sunset, to her surprise, found herself returning to her current circumstances, back in the cafe. Letting go of Sonata's hand, she placed that hand upon the side of her head, as though nursing a headache, and when she looked back to her companion, she saw her look into her with uncharacteristic seriousness. "Well?" she asked. Thinking long and hard on that, Sunset sighed. "Yeah, I see what you mean." Sonata nodded solemnly, only to be stopped when, just then, the cafe's waitress arrived, carrying yet another large milkshake in her hand. "I believe somebody ordered another one of these." To that Sonata's massive grin returned, and she waved her hand in the air like an eager schoolgirl. Much to the amusement of the waitress, the latter placed the milkshake upon the table before getting back to other business, and Sonata, sure enough, began to gulp the thing down unceremoniously. After doing so, she let out yet another contented sign. "Ah, sweet." But Sonata, seeing her, watched her carefully as she nodded. "Yeah, but maybe not as much as we think." The end. That's it for today, guys. See you tomorrow for a review.